Oh my god, hey, welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. If you are meeting me for the first time, hello! My name is MickeyJo and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I am a professional theatre critic based here in the UK, and this is my theatre YouTube channel where I review the shows that I have been invited to go and see. Tonight I had the privilege of getting to go to see Operation Mincemeat at the Fortune Theatre in the West End. This is technically considered a new musical in the sense that it is having its West End premiere right now, but I have been following this show for some time. I saw it for the first time shortly before the pandemic at a little off-West End theatre called Southwark Playhouse. I then saw it in a slightly larger auditorium with broadly the same production values at Riverside Studios, and I'm happy to say it has had a substantial glow-up for the West End, where it is now playing at the Fortune Theatre. If you have been to see Operation Mincemeat already at the Fortune Theatre in the West End, comment down below with what you thought of the show, and let me know what your favourite song was. By the time you are seeing this video, it will have just opened. What I technically saw was an embargoed press preview performance, and I'm going to tell you all about it now. So in today's video, I'm going to give you my full thoughts about this show, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about why it's arriving into the West End, already having won prestigious awards, already having tremendous word of mouth, and already having a collection of 5-star reviews, including my own from its previous run. This is a show you all need to be aware of, and today we're going to find out why. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to my Stagey YouTube channel for plenty more video reviews coming very soon about all of the other shows in town. Now, what exactly is Operation Mincemeat? Let's find out. So as I was travelling home from the theatre today, I was thinking about how I was going to describe this show to you all. And it's based on a true story, because that story has also been adapted for film. There was a film that was brought out last year called Operation Mincemeat, and that sort of very seriously and sincerely tells the story of this Second World War espionage operation that took place to convince the Germans that the British were going to be invading a different part of Europe in order to get the Germans to move their troops to a different location so that when the British did invade Sicily, it would go better. Now, the musical is about that same real-life mission and all of the same characters, and broadly speaking it follows the same plot, except it does so in a way that is tonally completely different. This is not serious or sincere or giving you like heavy World War II on stage. This is a ridiculous, farcical, absurd comedy. It has a cast of 5 performers who all multi-role through a variety of different genders. Most of them spend most of the show playing a gender different to their own. And it is just genuinely hilarious. Like, you have musicals that have jokes, and then you have something like this, which is just a full comedy show. I decided that the easiest way for me to describe this is actually kind of like Star Kid, but just so very British. If you were to put Star Kid into a mixer with just so much tea and just mix it all around, I feel like this is what you would get. If you have no idea what Star Kid is, then have a search on YouTube. But for those of you who do know, I feel like that's a very accurate comparison as to kind of how off the wall and contemporary the humour in this show is. Now, the plot concerns Ewan Montague and Charles Chumley, one of whom is hugely self-assured and arrogant and ambitious, and the other of whom is just none of those things, but is remarkably intelligent. And between them, they are overseeing this plan that Charles has come up with, and Ewan has taken it upon himself to pitch to their boss, Johnny Bevan. With the help of new recruit Jean Leslie, who finds herself frustrated at the limited opportunities for women in the workplace, as well as the very officious and surprisingly lovable Hester, they go about trying to pull this whole thing off. And the cast of 5 performers portray not only these characters, but also Germans and Americans and British expatriates in Spain and everyone else conceivably necessary in order to tell this story in the funniest possible way. So let me tell you a little bit more about why this show is so great. So like I said, the whole thing is just so funny. The book, music and lyrics have all been jointly written by the collective which is Spit Lip Theatre, which is David Cumming, Felix Hagen, Natasha Hodgson and Zoe Roberts, 3 of whom also perform in the show and have been doing so since the beginning, since what feels like the beginning of time, in fact. Before I move on, what I love about the score of this show is it's not only genuinely so funny, but the songs are also just such utter bops, like the pulse that they have to them. It's contemporary, but they're giving you a range of genres as well. Some of them are just like slightly more traditional musical theatre. There's a couple of really heartfelt, sincere moments. We're going to talk more about that later on in the review. But there are some absolute anthems of melodies in there, like the song Making a Hero, like the Act 1 finale. I mean, there's so many really legitimately great songs in there that also happen to be very funny. And on top of the way that they are written, it's the way that they are staged with this feverish insanity that has always been why this show is hilarious. Now, it's always had something. It's been this plucky little show that could, and just the energy they bring to it and their style of comedy where the whole thing is very irreverent. In terms of other stage productions, the closest thing I would compare it to would be Pride and Prejudice, sort of. Like, it's that same kind of beautiful stupidity that I love very much, and that is deceptively difficult to do. It actually takes a great amount of wit and intelligence. So when I say stupid, that is the highest praise that I can give something in comedy. But like I was saying, it has been this little plucky show that could, and you have always been able to see the quality of this material. That's why it has already won the Evening Standard Award for Best Musical some years ago. It has already had 5-star reviews from major publications. It has already earned tremendous word of mouth from audiences, enough for it to sell out a bunch of different runs despite having no like big star casting, no hugely commercial title. It is because the material is so good. And the last time I saw it, what I realized is it was starting to need a bigger production. I was starting to become aware of the limitations of the set. It really didn't have very much set at all to speak of the last time I saw it, and sort of the thinness of the orchestration. I was starting to notice that it was outgrowing the size of the production that it had, but as of yet they hadn't found anyone who was willing to take the chance on this show. Thankfully, now they have. So I was very curious when I sat down to watch the show this evening as to how embellished the show would be aesthetically, and the set design that they have got for this production it's just glorious. Even if it was just to be that static set that we first see, it would be a huge improvement. But the capabilities of this set and the things that it can do and the tricks that it has up its sleeve, some of which don't even get deployed until the second act, some of which don't even get deployed until the last few minutes of the show. Just remarkable. It is very clearly the masterful work of Ben Stones, who was also responsible for the amazing set design of Standing at the Sky's Edge earlier this year at the National Theatre, this year's Olivier Award-winning Best Musical, and the productions also gained that show's director, Robert Hastie. Now, much of the show is very similar to the version that I saw before Robert was involved, but from what I can tell, the areas where I notice his input the most seem to be the sort of choreographed chaos of the show. Now, you have 5 people multi-rolling and many times in the show swapping very quickly in and out of different outfits and portraying different people, and there are set pieces swiveling around and you have people running around them to be different people and create different characters, and these very high-paced espionage sequences. And a lot of these sections seem to be a little bit extended, and just the slickness with which they have been choreographed tremendously impressive and tremendously satisfying. Because in many of those instances, it's not always the most efficient thing that we need, because the audience needs to be able to see how impressive it is that we are swapping between all of these characters. Sometimes it's done in a way where it's kept from us, and then we have other moments where we can see them jumping in and out of these different scenes and running around to make it all happen. And the slickness with which that's been choreographed, like I said, is wonderful and remarkable. And as much as anything else, it's also a tribute to these performers and how distinct these characterizations are when they are just putting on a hat and swapping from one to the other, because the costuming remains relatively consistent throughout. They, like I said, are portraying multiple different genders, and they use this sort of androgynous businessware in order to do that. When you have male performers portraying female characters, they don't do a full drag, but it's suggested through other different things, and it's mostly down to the characterizations of those performers to convince us and to establish which characters they're playing at that moment. And that is done so cleverly and so clearly that the storytelling, especially on this latest version of the show, is just so clear, so legible throughout. So if you want to talk about which moment in the show is a standout, I actually have two. And that's before I even talk about the ending, which I'm not going to talk about. I don't want to spoil for you what happens, but the way that this is staged just blew my mind as to what they were achieving on this stage, far beyond what I was expecting from this production. So you have that to look forward to. But before we get to that, I would say the two most rewarding moments of the show are tonal polar opposites. One happens in the first act in a song called Dear Bill, and the other one opens the second act. If you've seen the show before, you already know exactly what I'm going to say about both of these moments. So Dear Bill comes after a series of comedy songs, and it comes in a scene where we're getting a lot of laughs because Charles and Jean are both struggling to collaborate on a forged love letter that they need as part of their deceptive scheme. They enlist the help of their older colleague Hester, who unexpectedly comes out with this hugely heartfelt and very clearly deeply personal recollection of how a letter ought to be written during wartime. And that is through a song called Dear Bill, performed by Jack Malone as Hester. What I love about Jack's performance as Hester is that it's not a drag performance, it's not a caricature, it's not played for laughs, it's played incredibly earnestly, incredibly sincerely. It's one of my favourite stage performances, and specifically for this moment and this song, it's just beautifully small and subtle and deeply human, and it will absolutely make you cry. Every single time I've seen it and heard this song, it makes me cry. And it's not in an obvious way. It's not some huge, incredible tragedy, and we're not pouring our feelings out. It's just this slight crack of vulnerability that we can glimpse through, and it's a beautiful, touching instance that is then gone. And it's a wonderful thing for the show to include, because there's no requirement for this hilarious, ridiculous, absurd show to include any kind of ounce of humanity, but it's the better for doing that, for having that moment, and it completely catches you off guard for that reason. And then for something completely different, they open the second act with a fascist boy band number where they are all playing SS officers and singing a song called Das Übermensch, which is this German techno boy band moment with this dark red lighting, and the choreography of it when they are dabbing to the far right is, I mean, that's just genius. The whole scale of that number, the way it's been choreographed, the way it's been lit, lands the whole thing as such a ridiculous OTT moment. The lyrics are brilliant, and the audience completely gets that for the silliness of what it is. No one is taking it seriously, as they shouldn't. So I think it's time I talk to you about the incredibly talented cast members of the show Operation Mincemeat. I'm going to start with the first one we meet, Natasha Hodgson, one of my favourites. Every time that I've seen her in this show, she's just fantastic. She predominantly plays Ewan Montague. He is this obnoxious and incredibly confident and self-assured spy who believes that everyone ought to listen to everything that he has to say, and that he is going to be this acclaimed hero. And his brash confidence gets increasingly more absurd and gets played for laughs as well, which is wonderful. He's not just this arrogant, egotistical character that becomes dislikable. We get to laugh at him for all of the right reasons as the show goes on. And I think it's because Natasha plays him so clearly tongue-in-cheekly and so clearly self-awarely that he can still be an endearing character. But I mean, she's just a hugely charismatic performer, especially in this role. Natasha's Ewan Montague feels like a top trumps card with 100 score for charisma. And it's such a clear characterization that from quite early on in the show, because the vocal delivery is so distinctive, she can just make noises and get laughs out of those noises, because everything is played around this sort of low growly place, and so she just has to go like and we'll get laughs out of that. It's brilliant. Opposite Natasha, we have David Cumming, another Spitlip Theatre member, and he is playing Charles Chumley. David is one of the most expressive performers, and what he does with his eyes and his face while he is playing Charles, and the way that he goes from this place of complete well-meaning, endearing insecurity to having these fits of hysteria are so funny. He has this recurring joke about newts that I love, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but Aaron pointed out to me, my boyfriend, how much I was bouncing up and down in my seat laughing at his delivery of this joke. He is so funny, as are they all. He has a wonderful sort of an I Want song quite early on called Dead in the Water that seems like it's going to be completely earnest and heartfelt, and then just again goes to this ridiculous comic place that I love. I really enjoy how often this show deceives you into going into one direction and then pulls the rug out from underneath you, kind of like what the whole plot is about. It is honestly like theatrical espionage. They were joined on stage by Jerry Allen, who has joined this production for its latest run and was making her debut as Johnny Bevan and other characters, including the very sweaty Hazelden, based in southern Spain. Now, Bevan is not the most exciting of roles. He gets to rap a little bit in a section that is quite clearly inspired by Hamilton, but Hazelden is a very fun character to get to play in the second act, and I really liked Jerry's performance in this role. I was also enjoying getting to see her make, I believe, her like full West End debut, certainly her debut in this show. She did a great job. It's an incredibly challenging track to jump into. They have to work so closely together, the five of them, in terms of like the props being thrown around, in terms of moving the set pieces, in terms of the costume changes, some of those quick changes, the speed with which they have to be done, and the multi-rolling, and you're swapping into one person and out of another, and it's madness. It's utter madness. Claire Marie Hall plays Jean Leslie, who is one of the less comedic characters in the show, but she's feisty and she gets to front a few good numbers, talking about independence for young women during the Second World War and taking the opportunity to advance in the workplace. So she's a fun character. She also gets to play a Welsh guy in Spain with Hazelden, and I like that comedic moment. I wish there were more opportunities for Claire to really dial up the comedic silliness, but for the most part in this show, her job is to play Jean and give you a different kind of a story. She still has some funny moments, but she's giving you an empowered heroine as well, and she does so very well. And she can also be heard belting out top harmony lines in all of the ensemble vocals. Don't think I didn't hear those, Claire Marie Hall. I absolutely did. They are very high and very well sung. Finally, Jack Malone, who just about steals the show in a few great roles. Not only Hester, which I think is a beautiful creation of a portrayal, but he also gets to play a very ostentatious American pilot and give you a great tenor vocal that is completely different from his Hester vocal. Like a chameleon as a performer and as a vocalist is Jack Malone. He plays a surly submarine captain. He plays a coroner with baffling levels of theatricality. Like, Jack Malone can do it all. He is such an impressive performer, and I am gonna say, even though it's very early, that I do think he should get an Olivier Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor in a Musical. So who do I think would enjoy this show? Like I said, if you want to laugh at the theatre, I think this is one of the funniest things going right now. It has such a contemporary sensibility. It's going to be really popular with young people, couples in their 20s, but I also think because we have this wartime plot that might be really fun for older generations as well. And it is so quintessentially British. This is utterly British humour. If you like A Star Kid, I think this is the closest thing that we might have tonally, or at least it seems very familiar of it to me. If you're one of those people who doesn't like going to musicals because you don't think it makes sense when people sing and dance their feelings, then this is done in such a tongue-in-cheek way, and it is predominantly funny before it is anything else. I think this would be a great show for you to go and see. And it fires on so many different comedic levels. We have like highly thought out like sophisticated wit, and we just have silliness. We have the two coexisting in such a brilliant way that I think anyone who wants to laugh can go and see Operation Mincemeat and we'll have a great time. I also think this is going to be one to watch over the next year in terms of awards. It's already won the Evening Standard Award for its pre-West End run, but it will now be eligible for a few more. So if you're someone who likes to follow an awards season, make sure you don't miss Operation Mincemeat, because I promise you, everyone is going to be talking about this show. But those have been my thoughts about it. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my Stagey YouTube channel. Hit the link in the description if you want to sign up to become one of my channel members. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm MickeyJoTheatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!